5 kilometers from the capital, Muscat. The botanic gardens are envisioned with the intent of providing memorable experiences to visitors for generations to come. Once open, it will showcase all the native plant species of Oman in a series of carefully created naturalistic habitats. These range from dry, arid deserts to the rich monsoon-fed forests in the south of the country. The garden will also showcase the traditional practices people used to cultivate crops and the many ways in which people use plants in the Sultanate. The 8 habitats featured includes the oases, wadis, sabkha, sand deserts, northern mountains, northern gravel deserts, central deserts, and lastly, the southern mountains. Nearly 3.5 million Omani riyals has been raised for volunteer teams and charity organizations that are doing their best to help those who require assistance, which includes many affected by COVID-19. Charitable organizations have received donations worth 3,449,676 Omani riyals so far this year through the donate.om portal to assist people in need of aid. This includes some affected by layoffs and reduced purchasing ability during the pandemic. Habib Al-Subi, who's the director of the Associations and Community Organizations Department at the Ministry of Social Development, encouraged all those who could contribute towards a worthy cause to do so, because our small donation today could put a smile on another person's face tomorrow. Any amount you donate will contribute towards solving problems, he said. Habib Al-Subi admitted that due to the challenging circumstances faced by people both around the world and in Oman at present, there are many families in the country that were previously not dependent on aid but now find themselves needing assistance. In light of an increasing number of families requiring intervention from charities, he praised the efforts being made by organizations and donors who have shown solidarity with those in need of assistance by donating when it matters the most. Now, as I mentioned earlier, that we have a very special guest joining us today who will be talking about the inheritance law for the expats in the Sultanate. So let's welcome Mr. Yasin Chaudhry. Thank you so much, Mr. Yasin, for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you very much for having me again. So it's my pleasure as well to revert to the times table.
It has been a really long time since you came and joined us for a conversation.
Yeah, I would like to come on frequent basis, and inshallah in future we will maintain that schedule.
Inshallah. So Mr. Yasin, for today's topic, before we start to get into the details, could you tell us briefly about the inheritance law that is there for the expats in the Sultanate?
Yes, in the Sultanate of Oman now there are several statutes or the laws which deal with the matter of inheritance. When a person dies, either testate or intestate, that means whether he leaves any will or whether he doesn't leave any will in terms of his property. So there are several laws now in Oman. One of them is civil code, and that civil code specifically sets up the provision how actually the taqsim or the division of property of the deceased or administration of his estate will be done. And that provision clearly says that the person who has died, the deceased person, the law he was subjected during his death or at the time of his death, that law will prevail, and that will be the governing law in terms of the administration of his estate. And the similar provision is also found in another statute in the Sultanate. We call it personal status law. And that law also has a similar provision in terms of the applicability of the law of the deceased, to which law he is subjected to during the time of his death. So just to sum up, an expat from which country he is, of which country he is national of. So that country's law will prevail or will apply in terms of the division or the administration of his estate. And in addition to that, there are some other laws because as you are aware, in the Sultanate there were some restrictions before for an expat to own real estate property. So, but there are now some new developments under which the expats are allowed to own the real estate as well, especially in ITC, the integrated tourism complex. So that particular law has a separate provision for the inheritance of the real estate of a deceased expat. So in general, these are the provisions in the Sultanate which are prevalent in terms of inheritance, in terms of administration estate of a deceased expat.
Thank you, Mr. Yasin. So you mentioned different categories of the provision and different law applies in those provisions. Could you tell us briefly, step by step, in the certain provision, what happens in the case of sudden or unfortunate death of the expat in the Sultanate?
Actually, the inheritance law, when a person dies, when an expat in particular, that our topic today, this inheritance law in terms of the money or money equivalent, we will restrict and limit our discussion to that scope because the real estate property that I was referring to, that under the ITC provision, or even the recent REIT provision where the expats are allowed to hold share in real estate trust fund. So those things will be out of discussion today. Our discussion will be limited to the cash equivalent, money equivalent matter. So for this purpose, in terms of this scope, when a person dies here in Oman, because we're talking about the expats, so yes, generally, as I said, we have to file a petition to the court for the division of the left property of the deceased, and from there the court will proceed with certain procedures. Especially, court will be asking for some other documents to evidence the claim of a particular petitioner who is claiming to be the heirs of the deceased. But the very important thing, what we all the time advise our clients when we see different queries coming to our offices, all the time we actually advise the client to plan their succession ahead, because as you were asking what happens if someone dies suddenly, then our advice is actually to plan this unsudden occurrence. Of course, no one knows when this thing may happen. So that's why if we plan succession, and when I say planning succession, it means that to leave a will and also to make a document covering the intention of the testator to whom he wants to give his money equivalent,
Right.
either his daughters or sons or wife. So yes, the first thing we need to plan succession ahead, and if someone makes a will, and if there is a sudden death of that particular person, then it's very easy and much more easier procedure for us as a practitioner, and also to make the claim a success in the court, just referring to the will, and which has the full coverage of the intention of the testator, how he wanted to divide and how he wanted to dispose his property in his absence. So the first and foremost advice to plan succession, and then we can take that will paper to the court for the particular disposition of the property as part of the will.
Right. Mr. Yasin, I am so glad that you actually brought up the topic of the will and how important it is to have the will ready or the succession papers ready, because you never know what unfortunate event may come or may occur in future. So what really happens if there is an absence of will or any legal document in this case?
Well, if there is no will, then it will definitely procrastinate the process in the courts, And also in terms of procedure, we have to file a petition in the court with a succession certificate. Since we are talking about the expats, that succession certificate has to be issued from the home country of the deceased, and it's a lengthy process that you have to address that local union member or the local government member that will issue the certificates, and then that has to be attested. And when it comes to when I talk about the attestation, it's a huge lengthy process. There are different channels, the diplomatic channels you have to go through, involving the foreign of the home country and other authenticating authorities. And then that has to come here in Oman. We have to submit to the court, and then it is the discretion of the court how to apply the law in terms of the division of the property of the deceased. Unlike will, general provision, yes, the law of the deceased person's national country will apply, as I told you before. But there are occurrences and cases where we found that the court actually applied and totally different provision as prevalent in the Sultanate. So that it's a lengthy process, will create a lot of inconveniences, and also because we're talking about the money equivalent matters. So maybe the heirs of the deceased don't have that much sort of passions to go through. Maybe they will be already in trouble because the only person in the family who was earning, and he's not there anymore. And when we actually file a petition in the court for succession and the division of property, the bank account and all other matters dealing with the money equivalent of the deceased become frozen. And this is a very practical inconvenience. If you think about the daughters and the wives and children of the deceased who are already in a very emotional situation because of the loss of the earning member of the family, but they need money to help and go through the process. But because of this lengthy process, the inconveniences multiplies, and that will cause a huge problem in practice.
Right. Mr. Yasin, you mentioned about the daughters, and then we're talking about will. So what happens in the case if there are no sons, there are no boys in the family? Can a person actually have a will and inherit all his property to his daughters or wife?
Yes, this is another benefit of making a will during the lifetime of the testator, during the lifetime of a person who is having, in terms of money in the bank account, or there is a compensation coming from a company, or maybe even there is a life insurance of the deceased. So these all are subject to money and money equivalent, and that will definitely come to the heirs of the deceased. So now it's a normal tendency of a person who is here and earning the money with a huge sort of trouble. So of course they want to give whatever they have and ensure those financial security for their family members, especially for their for their daughters and wife, if they don't have any son. So in that case, if there is a will, yes, the testator can make a will giving or disposing all his money equivalent in the name of his daughter or in the name of his wife, and that will generally upheld in the court of the Sultanate. So if there is a will, and it's very much possible and will be upheld in the court as a general principle. The reason I'm saying as a general principle, sometimes we have seen in practice out of some of the cases where actually court didn't allow the full disposition of the property to a particular heir by the testator, because there is a limitation on the wills, how much money or property you can actually dispose to a particular heir. Apart from those one or two or few exceptions, yes, a person or a testator can still dispose all of his money equivalent in favor of his daughter or his wife. However, if there is no will, and if the testator dies without any will and without any testation, then that will create a huge problem. Because, as you know, there are different categories of the heirs under the law. So, and then when a person dies, the succession opens. And when we say succession opens, it means all the heirs that who are recognized under the law to inherit all becomes heirs and legally, legally legitimately having claim to inherit. So no, we cannot actually renounce anyone's claim. Saying that no, you are not closely related to the deceased, all should go to the daughter. That will not happen. But in case of will, there is a high chance, and as a general principle, yes, that kind of will be upheld in the court.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yasin, for clarifying that point in so much detail. I hope the viewers have understood this point, because what I'm understanding, it is very important to have some sort of legal document or a will prepared during your life to avoid any kind of chaos that could occur in future.
Yes, just to add some more matter out of our practice, for the expats community. Especially when even you make a will, there are some procedures that you have to follow so that will be upheld in the court in future. There are some procedural matters, for example, witnessing a particular will, and then attestation part of the will, and also the translation. If the will is not done in Arabic, so it should be done in both Arabic and other language. So everything is ready and ready to use in the court, so that the succession matter can be disposed of without any encumbrance. So those general, minor issues becomes very handy when you plan your succession beforehand, and it proved time and again very useful for the heirs of the deceased.
Right. Mr. Yasin, one important question that I really wanted to ask you is that, we have been hearing this term all the time, next to kin, the word kin. So what exactly do we mean by, or who qualifies under this category?
Actually, the Sharia law, as we have in Sultanate, as I was referring to the personal status law, under the Sharia, there are three different categories depending on the madhab or the school you are referring to. There are different classes of heirs. So some heirs who are mentioned in the Quran, so those are normally called as Quranic shares, and they all the time take the prevalence over other heirs. So these are number one class. And there is a number two, there is a asaba we call the residuaries. And then number three, there is a distant kindred. So when we talk about the kin, it's a general term we use in relation to the deceased. But under the law, we actually divide all the kins and the relatives under three categories. So and these three categories takes precedence over the other categories one by one and one by one. So if there is a Quranic sharers, they will take the full, property of the deceased. And if after dividing the property among the Quranic shares or some property are left anyhow, then they will go to the second and third category of the heirs. So that's how the administration of a state is divided or done in terms of Sharia law.
Right. And Mr. Yasin, my last question is that what happens in the case of absence of no kin? Especially for those expats living in the Sultanate, who does the inheritance goes to?
Actually, if there is no heirs left who are recognized under the law as a legitimate heir of the deceased, then the left out of the deceased property shall go to the Baitul Mal or to the state. This is a very generally practiced principle all over the world. If there is no one to take the property of a deceased person because there is no heirs left as recognized under the law, then that property will revert to the state, to Baitul Mal, so to speak, in Oman.
Thank you so much, Mr. Yasin, for joining us and talking us on such an important topic. And thank you for clarifying such crucial points that, one would not think of it as important, but it surely is very important.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. It's time for us to take a quick commercial break, but stay tuned as we have more updates coming your way from our international desk. Welcome back to TTV. You're watching Midday Update. And now from our international desk. Japan's daily COVID-19 infections hit a record high of 15,753 on Saturday for the fourth consecutive day, while the number of people hospitalized in Tokyo also reached a fresh high, local media reported yesterday. Tokyo, hosting the Olympics while under a state of emergency, reported 4,566 daily COVID-19 cases on Saturday, exceeding 4,000 cases for the fourth straight day. Strains are growing over hospitals in Tokyo as the number of inpatients hit 3,485, which surpassed the record of 3,427 in early January. The latest figures are released a day after Japan's cumulative total of confirmed COVID-19 cases topped 1 million. The turning point of the COVID-19 pandemic seems yet to come amid the spread of the highly contagious Delta variant. Concerns are growing over a potential collapse of the medical system and the further spread of the Delta variant during the Bon holiday period, since people usually return to their hometowns or travel elsewhere during this period. To curb the resurgence of the COVID-19 infections, the Olympics were mostly held without spectators. The state of emergency for Tokyo will not end when the Paralympics are scheduled to begin on August 24th. The Japanese government has recently expanded the state of emergency and also decided to pour more prefectures under a quasi-state of emergency. A senior Palestinian official on Saturday announced that 95% of the recent COVID-19 infections in the West Bank are that of the Delta variant. Palestinian Minister of Health Mai Al-Kaila told reporters in the West Bank city of Ramla that COVID-19 Delta variant is spreading in all West Bank towns, adding that 95% of the recorded cases were infected by the new spreading variant. She clarified that until now, the epidemiological situation in the West Bank does not need to go for a lockdown, adding that the health ministry needs assistance to limit the spread of the deadly virus and then take all the needed measures later. She said that keeping cities and economic institutions open and resuming education at schools and universities requires a societal responsibility through citizens' awareness to prevent the virus from spreading on a large scale. The recorded cases in Palestine are witnessing a slight increase and the curve is rising from what it was a few days ago, she said, adding that she is deeply concerned that this is an indication of the entry of the fourth wave of COVID-19. Meanwhile, the minister called on every Palestinian aged over 18 years old to immediately go to the vaccination centers in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip and abide by the precautionary measures of wearing face masks and social distancing. Once again, it's time for a quick commercial break, but stay tuned as we have more updates coming your way from a sports desk.
Mr. Bean has taken part at the Olympics. At the opening ceremony of 2012 London Olympics, much-loved comedic character Mr. Bean plays an important role. During the ceremony, the Brit is shown to be part of the orchestra playing the opening theme, during which he pictures himself taking part in a long-distance sprint. Easily outspaced by the other athletes, he then decides to take a famed London cab to the end point of the race, where he knocks over his closest competitor and crosses the finish line. Bean emerges from his rivalry to find the orchestra conductor staring at him and asking him to finish the song at the opening ceremony, which he duly does, amid cheers from the audience.
Talking about Tokyo Olympics, today France beat the Russian Olympic Committee team by 30-25 in the women's handball final, avenging their final defeat in Rio. Team USA beat France by 87-82 against all adversity to win its fourth consecutive Olympic gold today. Bakhodier Jalolov of Uzbekistan won the men's super heavy final to claim the last boxing gold on offer at the Tokyo Olympic Games that's set to conclude on Sunday night. The United States swept Brazil by 3-0 in the women's volleyball final on Sunday to win their first Olympic gold medal. World champion Lauren Price of Britain beat China's Li Qian in the women's middle final to win her first Olympic gold on Sunday. The 27-year-old won the bout on a unanimous decision 5-0 and bagged Britain's second boxing gold at the Tokyo Olympic Games after Galal Yefai's victory in the men's fly division. Eliud Kipchoge of Kenya won the men's marathon gold medal in a time of 2:08:38 at the Tokyo Olympic Games on Sunday. British cyclist Jason Kenny won the men's keirin at the Tokyo Olympic Games on Sunday. Kenny dominated the field and made a decisive move in the last lap to take the goal, beating Muhammad Aziz Al Hasni Awang of Malaysia to the second place. The United States successfully defended its Olympic title again by beating Japan 90-75 in the women's basketball competition on Sunday. This is the seventh consecutive Olympic championship for the US since 1996. The US won 9 gold medals in the past 10 Olympic Games dated back in 1984. American cyclist Jennifer Valenti won the cycling track women's omnium at the Tokyo Olympic Games on Sunday as well. Valenti collected a total of 124 points to take the gold, beating Yumi Kajihara of Japan to the second place in 110 points. Bulgaria snatches gold in Rhythmic Gymnastics group all around at Tokyo 2020 on Sunday. The Bulgarian team topped the competition in 92.100 points, followed by defending champion Russian Olympic Committee in 90.700 points. Italy took bronze in 87.7 points. Now some from the weekend. Indian javelin thrower Neeraj Chopra has become the first Indian to win an athletics medal and is only the second to win an individual medal at the Olympics. The 23-year-old who earned his gold medal at the men's javelin final on Saturday has made his time at the Tokyo Olympics all the more special given this was his Olympic debut. Egypt's karateka Faryal Ashraf Abdelaziz made history by bagging first gold medal for her country in the women's 61 kg Kumite at the Tokyo 2020 Olympics on Saturday. It is the first gold medal achieved by Egypt since Athens Olympics in 2004 and the 8th gold medal in the country's Olympic history since 1912. And lastly, another one from India, grappler Bajrang Punia won a bronze medal in the men's freestyle 65 kg category in the ongoing Tokyo Olympics yesterday after defeating Kazakhstan's Dolat Niazbekov. With this, let's have a final look down at the medal tally for today. We have come to the end of the episode for today, but stay tuned as we'll be back again tomorrow, same time, with more updates and latest news your way. Keep watching TTV.
You've just heard the live feed from the TTV studios on TFM 95.4. Let's talk.